Call the meeting order. Regular scheduled meeting of the Kentucky Regional Planning and Development Agency on today's date, Thursday, January 25th, 2024 at 2:00. And first up on our agenda, of course, is the roll call.
We have Miss Diana Arnold. I see you, Miss Arnold. Miss Tammy Gibson for Kevin Beatty.
Here.
Honorable Scott Bates. Here. Honorable John Black. Here. Honorable Bernard Bowling.
Here.
Honorable Byron Chapman.
Here.
Honorable Jack Kaufman.
Here.
Honorable Troy Ethington. Honorable Jeff Gahan. I think I see Chris John.
Yeah, I'm here.
Honorable Nicole George for the Honorable Craig Greenberg.
Present.
Mr. Keith Griffey.
Here.
Mr. Albert Tubby Purcell for the Honorable Treva Hodges.
Here.
Honorable Maria Johnson. Honorable Dan Eisen.
Here.
Honorable Mike Moore. Honorable John Ogburn.
Here.
Mr. Matt Munay for the Honorable Carol Pike.
Here.
Honorable John Schnellenberger. Or Schellenberger, excuse me. Thank you. Honorable Jerry Summers. The judge called. I know he is probably somewhere on Gene Snyder, so he should be here any minute. Honorable Rick Tonini.
Here.
Honorable Jim Travis. Honorable Scott Travis.
Here.
And the Honorable David Vogel. See on there,
Kevin.
Judge.
4.
And Kevin. So we got both Kevin Nuss and Judge Vogel. So we have a quorum and a fantastic turnout today. So thank you all for being here.
Great. Thank you all very much. Welcome this afternoon. Glad to see everyone here. And thank you for those who are online. We appreciate that. Your excuse is not the weather, that's for sure. So we're blessed with some nice weather today and hope everyone survived the recent weather issues that we had. So we thank you all for being here today. So next item then comes up on our agenda is the November board meeting minutes. As you know, we don't meet in December, so our last meeting was then in November, board meeting minutes. So I don't know if everyone had a chance to take a look at those. We'd like to entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
Motion approved.
Do you have a motion? Do we have a second? Have a second? Are there any other questions or discussion? If
Yeah,
none,
this is John Schellenberger.
yes, John? You here with us? I think you just reporting then. Okay,
Okay, can you hear me now?
yes?
Yes, sir.
I thought I was in attendance there. I thought it was a Zoom call, and I think I was heading back from Indianapolis, but I may be mistaken. I just want to bring that to your attention.
Okay, it's fine. We can make that adjustment then
Okay,
in the minutes, okay?
thank you.
So if there are no more discussions or questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Motion carried. Next up is our December financial statements. And Ms. Shaw, do you have that for us?
Yes, I do. We did not have our November, well, in November, we had our meeting a little earlier than usual. And so we did not have our October financials complete at that time. And then, of course, we didn't have a December meeting, and now we're in January. So I have put the October and November financials in your packet for your review, but I'll be going over the December financials here today. Once you have a chance to review the October and November financials, you can feel free to contact me with any questions that you have. As of December 31st of 2023, we're about 50% through our fiscal year 24. And going over our fiscal year 24 summary of elements, we have a spend of CED of $474,074. Our transportation, $1,488,000, and $8,681. Oh, I'm getting tongue-tied today. Sorry about that. Social services, $2,829,611, for a total of $14,536,613. And then we go on to our agency line item revenue and expenses report. Our year-to-date of revenue is $14,350,697. And then our year-to-date expenditures is, of course, the $14,536,613. And we have spent 41.37% as of December of 2023. Our balance sheet, our cash is $2,345,870. And this includes our CDO and / PDS. And total accounts receivable is $3,056,620. And our total liability is $20,369,901. Have any questions? Yes, you plus action.
Okay, any more questions of Ms. Shaw? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the December financial statement. Have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other questions? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Move on to the next item. Ms. Shaw, I think you have the fiscal year 23 agency audit report.
Yes, I would like to introduce Gina Jones. She's with Strothman, our auditors in, well, LPNC. And she will be presenting our audit.
Thank you.
Okay, I was here, November, to give a brief update that we were still working on the audit, but,
Right.
we have the draft audit here in front of you. We are awaiting the final approval from the, auditor of public accounts. And then we will get you your final version of this report. So the big bound, copy that you have in front of you is the audit report, for the fiscal year, June 30, 2023. And if you will flip to, the first page, go past the table of contents. This is our independent auditor's report. This is a unmodified or clean opinion, so it's the highest level of opinion that an organization can receive. You will see in the second paragraph, on page 1, it says, in our opinion, based on our audit, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects, in accordance with GAAP. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph to you. And then our independent auditor's report also goes down and talks about the responsibilities of management related to the financial statements. And then on page 2, it talks about what the auditor's responsibilities are. And then there's some additional required disclosures about different statements that are in this report. So if you go to page 4, this is the management's discussion and analysis. And this is basically just management's summary or analysis of the financial statements and the financial performance for fiscal year 2023 compared to 2022. This is required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. And then it also just talks about any other significant changes that happened during the year for the organization. I'm not going to go through that. I'll let you read that on your own, but I just wanted to kind of highlight what exactly that is, and that's on pages 4 through 8. So if you'll flip to page 9, and I'm assuming everybody that's online has the PDF. Is that right, Frida? Does everybody have the PDF of the report?
No.
Okay. So they're just listening online with me, okay. So on page 9, this is the statement of net position, or if this was a for-profit entity, this is what would be the balance sheet, the accrual basis balance sheet. When we go back farther in the statements, you'll see the governmental fund financial statements. But basically, these accrual basis financial statements include the capital assets, the compensated absences, and also the pension and OPEB liabilities. Those items are not on the governmental financial statements that we'll see, on pages 11 through 14. Just want to highlight just a few numbers on, this statement. You'll see total assets just about a third way down, 6.4 million. And that, compared to 2022 was 6 million. So that's up about 340,000 or about 5.6%. And then you'll see total assets and deferred outflows of resources of 10,790,000. And that is up about 1% or about $1 million, over the prior year, which is about 9.8 million. And then going down below, you've got the current liabilities, accounts payable, and other liabilities of 3.4 million. And it was about 3.1 in 2022. And then the, as I mentioned earlier, the pension and the OPEB liabilities, those are in the non-current liabilities. And for 2023, those are 10.8 million for the pension and 2.9 million for the OPEB liability. And these are not tracked on your regular financials that you guys review every month. These are required to be reported in accordance with GAAP and government accounting standards. So down at the very bottom, you'll see total net position or deficit, 10.2 million. So this is basically the equity or the retained earnings of the organization if this was a for-profit. In 2022, that was 10.6 million. So we actually had an increase of 400,000. So we actually had income in 2023. And we're going to look at that on the next page, on page 10. On page 10, you will see the third line from the bottom, 414,619. That's the change in net position or the net income for the year. And in 2022, that was 124,000. Just want to point out just a couple of things. Our operating grants were 28.4 million for fiscal 23. And in the prior year, it was 22.1 million. So that's an increase of 6.3 million for the year or 29%. So that's a really significant increase over the prior year federal grants. And the expenses are up about the same amount, which is what we would expect the expenses to be in line with those revenues. So on page 11, this is the governmental funds balance sheet, and this is what Frida presents to you guys on a monthly basis. These particular numbers on this, but this is on the modified cash basis, so it doesn't include any debt or long-term liabilities, which is the pension or the capital assets. I'm not going to really go through any of the numbers specifically, other than indicate that the total assets were 6.2 million, total liabilities and fund balance as well, 6.2, and that's up about 300,000 over the prior year, which is about 5.9 million. On page 12, this is a required statement to reconcile the government-wide financial statements to the government-wide financial statements. They do basically reconciling items, and you'll see the pension, the capital assets, and related items. On page 13, it is the statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in fund balance. So for the governmental funds, the actual change in fund balance will be is 63,000. And you saw in the other government-wide statements, it was 415,000. So that's the difference in those accruals. And on page 14, this is the reconciliation of the fund balance to the net position on the government-wide statement, going from the 63 million to the 414,000. 63,000, sorry, not million. Starting on page 15 for the financial statement disclosures. I'm not going to go through these notes because I don't want to bore you guys. You can read them yourselves, but basically, note A talks about the organization. Note B just talks about all the significant accounting principles. And that goes on for several pages. And then in notes H and I, and that starts on pages page 16. But those are the required disclosures for the pension liability and the OPEB liability. Just wanted to point that out, to you. And then, you flip to page 30, these are the, required disclosures related to the pension and the OPEB, plans. Those are all required by the governmental auditing standards. And those go on for the pages. And then on page 36, this is what we call the CFA, or the Schedule of the Federal Awards. So this details all the programs that the organization participates in, and the amount of federal money that is spent during the year. So that's pages 36 to 38, and on page 38, you'll see the total was 9,817,000. So that was the total amount spent on federal programs for the year. And part of our audit is to audit those federal programs. We have to do a determination of what a major program is, and we test those based on the audit standards. And the three programs that we tested as major during the year were the National Family Caregiver Support, the Title III program, the Medical Assistance Program, and then the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery. I'm happy to report we didn't have any findings, so back on page 77, that's the report on major programs under the uniform guidance. And if we had any findings, that would be reported in that report. But I'm happy to report there was clean audits and no findings. We didn't have any financial statement findings to report, so we did not issue a management letter. I will open it up for any questions. That's all I had that I wanted to kind of highlight on the report, unless there's something specific that somebody else wants to talk about. And then I have one other letter that I just have to kind of briefly go over. That's with the KIPDA. Any questions? Yes.
I know KIPDA operates basically by grants coming from the federal government, and then they disperse all the money that we do. My question always is, when I look at my audits, if I were to close up today, paid all my bills, got all my receivables in, how much would I be worth? Is there a number of what KIPDA could be worth at the end of the day to close up shops that were done? What would that number be?
Well, that's a good question. As of June 30, 2023, it's worth a negative 10 million.
So we're in the negative by 10 million?
Yeah, so if you were to look on page 6, page 9, the net position of the deficit, that's essentially the equity of the organization. And as of right now,
So I'd be out of that negative position.
that's a good question.
Is that because of the pension liability?
It is.
Yeah, so if we go to the actual government funds financial statements, which is on page 11, we have a positive 2.8 of fund balance. So that would be the equity of the organization without the pension liabilities, without the OPEB, without the compensated absence accruals, and those things that are required for the government financial statements. So actually, it's really in a positive situation, but because of the pensions and the OPEB, it takes it to a negative. My understanding that if, at some point, the state could potentially fund those liabilities, but I doubt that that's gonna happen, but.
I didn't know if through our services, I know we charge to provide services to different, counties, cities. I didn't know if those charges could have accrued and built up a cash balance over and above what we would owe otherwise, pay back to the federal. Would KIPDA have any cash that we could call our own at the end of the day?
Well, so right now, the liabilities of the organization at June 30, 2023 were 3.4 million. assets are 6.2. So the difference is the equity for that fund balance of 2.8. So.
Is that buildings and property and computers and all kinds of like that?
No, because on the fund financial statements on page 11, no fixed asset, no capital assets or anything is reported here. So on these financial statements, if you all purchase a bus or furniture or building or anything like that, it goes through an expenditure. It doesn't hit the balance sheet on the fund financial statements. Does that make sense? Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, the other letter that you have in front of you is, what we call our governance letter or required communications, to those charged with governance, which is the board of directors. So basically, we're required to disclose to you certain, items. So if there was any, accounting principles adopted during the year, we would disclose that in this letter. If there were any unusual transactions, we would report those, and everything. All the normal transactions have been reported. We were supposed to disclose any accounting estimates. So on page 2 at the top, the compensated absence accrual related to sick leave and vacation and stuff. That's one of the estimates, and then the pension liability, and OPEB liability, and then depreciation expense. If we had any difficulties during the audit, we will be required to disclose that with you as well. We didn't have any issues dealing with management during the audit. If there were any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, we would disclose those. I'm happy to report there were none. And if we had any disagreements with management, we would have to report that, and we're happy to report we didn't have any. And if we had any audit findings, we would report those in this letter, and as I indicated before, we didn't have any findings. So that concludes my report, unless anybody has any questions.
Any other questions? This is an action item, and so we need a motion then to accept the draft version of the fiscal year 23 agency audit.
I'd like to make the motion, also congratulate Jared on his leadership, his staff, accountants, because he has 0 findings. I had 7 last audit.
Okay,
So,
I appreciate that, and I want to make that same comment. This is the first audit in 35 years that Tom Pope was not leading, so compliments to Frida and her team with Jenny Lee and Alicia Russ, but also the management staff across this agency, including Tricia Forbes and social services, because they were very responsive, and I think it shows the fiscal management of this agency, and I'm very proud of it.
And they were great to work with, great to work with.
You as well.
Thank you.
all right, so we have a motion from John Black. Do we have a second?
second.
Have a second? Any other questions or discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
And also, just one last comment, my apologies, it's been a fluid situation this week, so I apologize to those that are online did not get this report, but this will be sent out to every member, so you all will have this report.
All right, thank you. Next up on our agenda is a report on You Decide Kentucky, and Miss Lena Muldoon is going to give us a report. Thank you, Lena.
Thank you. While we get that pinged up, I'll just say thank you, Jared, for the invitation, and to the board for having me, allowing me to be here with you all today. My name is Lena Muldoon. I'm the executive director of You Decide Kentucky. We're a statewide nonprofit that is dedicated to supporting efforts for a constitutional amendment for local tax reform. And as I walked in today, I realized the amount of people in this room that have heard this because of our efforts traveling around the state and giving these sort of presentations. And so I want to focus today on giving less of an introduction of who we are and more of an update on the efforts, especially given the legislative session. So just by way of giving a quick background, I am not your tax policy expert. I'm a local government person. I am somebody who's very passionate about improving our state, our local communities, empowering them. And You Decide Kentucky is the mechanism to ensure that once we are placed on the ballot with this measure, it actually passes. Because Kentuckians are galvanized, they're educated, they know what the issue is, and they feel empowered to go to that ballot and say, yes, we want to amend this section of the Constitution in this way because it's important. And it is a really, really challenging moment in our state. We have a lot of challenges in our communities, a lot of rising standards when it comes to economic development and population growth, but it's also a great opportunity because of this that is in front of us. This might be a topic that you all are familiar with. It's an effort that is 2 decades in the making, but this current iteration is sort of rejuvenated and reintroduced. And so if we could go to, I'm gonna skip a couple slides, but if we could go to the 5th slide, next one. Yes, here. This is the current proposal. So step by step, starting with, of course, the General Assembly. They are the body that needs to place a constitutional amendment on the ballot for Kentucky voter consideration. So the current legislative proposal has been in the form of a bill most recently filed as House Bill 475 in the 2022 session, led by Representative Michael Lee Meredith. He continues to be our champion. It did pass out of the House that session by 80 votes, a lot of support. And it's very, very simple. The amendment would simply strike the restrictions in that section of the Constitution that says our local governments can only levy these types of taxes that, as many of you are very familiar with, leads our local governments to being very dependent on very few options to raise revenue. And allow the General Assembly to restructure local tax policy, restructure or reimagine local tax code in Kentucky in statute where it belongs as opposed to in the Constitution. And so if the General Assembly were to pass that bill and place that amendment on the ballot, that would lead to a statewide referendum for the voters to decide and choose if they want to vote in favor for that. If that passes, that would be ideally this November, if not this November, another even number year. Then if that passes, it goes back to the General Assembly to create a new framework. So it's not that the voters approve it and immediately free for all, new taxes everywhere. The General Assembly would have to come back in whatever the next session that they convene to pass new laws regarding local taxation. And then it's up to local governments. Then it's up to local communities to decide how they implement that, how they want to use that, and how they want to use those new tools for what makes the most sense for them. So it's the local decision-making in action. It is absolutely a new chapter for our state. It's allowing us to be in line with the 30 other states in our nation that have this ability. That includes all of our neighbor states except for Indiana, and they're getting here. And it allows us to unlock the door to a Kentucky that we frankly have never known because we have been so handcuffed. So if we go to the next slide, you may, especially those that have been familiar with the past attempts at this, maybe asking yourself, what is different about this time? Why should we have hope in this effort? First of all, Unify Kentucky is a real game changer. Our sole focus is education and ballot support. Our only reason for existence is to ensure that the ballot measure passes. And part of that is that we provide research, and we did a poll recently to test the issue, test voter sentiments in Kentucky on the ballot question and local taxation in general. And we found that it's a very favorable issue. Kentuckians do support this issue. The problem is that they're confused about it. They don't quite know what it is. And so that's, of course, our job. But some of the messages that we know are very effective, and we have found in our 3 years of work, is talking about people having more say in public dollars, having an input on how local dollars are spent and keeping them local. And we've done that across a myriad of that specific message testing across various counties in Kentucky. And then of course the poll was across the whole state. And asking people if they want to amend the Constitution in this way and have a say in that restructuring and those new decisions, people unequivocally say yes. And so we know that this is an issue worth doing. The other game changer is the legislative support. At the state level, one of the pieces of the puzzle that has made this a sort of perfect storm is, income tax reform. We know that there's an appetite for tax reform in general, and the state income tax reform is inevitably going to have an impact on local governments. And so our state legislative leaders know that they can't really bring our state income tax reform measures to a certain level without allowing local governments the same ability to make that choice for themselves. And so it has led to a point where we have a lot of momentum, both at the local level with our coalition building, our grassroots work, and at the state. And right now in the legislative session, there's a lot of great discussions happening. Some of you are a part of those, and I encourage you to get more involved. If you're not, you can do that obviously through your representatives or through me if you don't know, have those other resources. But that is why this is different today. And we have to really grasp the opportunity and not let it slip away again. So next slide, please. This is our board of directors. You'll see that we are led by individuals from Hopkinsville and Corbin. They're fantastic, and we represent the entire state. It's heavy on Louisvillians because we were founded in Louisville and also great region, but we have learned from past efforts that it's important to be representative of the whole state and be diverse in the sense that this is something that will benefit not just the Golden Triangle, not just urban areas, but the entire state. And so these are the individuals that represent that message and work every single day to build our coalition even further. And next slide, please. We have a even larger reaching coalition that is those that have endorsed our effort, our donors that are not listed here, and they really help ensure that we are reaching expansively across the state and in different constituencies in different ways, and we're always growing this list. Next slide, please. So I am someone who, like I said, I'm a local government person. I worked for the city of Louisville for years and saw firsthand how local governments struggled to complete their promises, their goals when they are so restrained from having control over revenue. And I've served on this board, I've served on the Kentucky League of Cities board, and I know that this is universal across our state, and we simply cannot grow to where we want to be without taking this step. And we are very, very close to being able to doing so. So I hope that this has been informative, that this has given you something interesting to take away. And if you would like to get involved, the way to do that is to use your voice and to, talk with me about the best way to do that moving forward. But I'm very appreciative of your time and for all that you all do as local leaders. It is a thankless and extremely important job. So thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Everyone in my community thinks we've got too many taxes already. Because we tax everything. Seems like, we've got a tax for everything going. Honestly, seems like, but I guess my question for you would be, all of us sitting in here pretty much hate to pay taxes, hate to pay it out of your check, hate to pay, so my question is, how do you expect Kentuckians to go in to vote for this? Because I think they're just gonna think it's just gonna be an open door for local governments just to tax everything and anything. So how do you propose to educate people to go in there and pull that ballot for yes, for tax reform? What are you gonna be saying?
Mm-hmm. And that's our biggest and first battle, right, is that message, because as soon as somebody says increase or additional taxes, that opposition has won. It's the easiest opposition message and the least expensive. But we are trying to get ahead of that message before it even begins, because we think that this is a way to reduce taxes on Kentuckians. We have to raise the majority of our local government revenues from taxing Kentuckians' paycheck, and we are unable to shift that burden onto tourists, people who come to visit, who drive through our state. And so we want to make sure that that message is clear. Also, the coalition is very important to make that that notion and that intention very clear. So having the legislature, the legislators on board, the business community, and making sure that those endorsements are front and center. We're working now on having, some national influencers endorsements and their voices at the forefront that will be major in shifting that perception as well. So sort of multiple fronts, but first and foremost, the message being blunt in this not being higher taxes.
So when you propose to do away with the occupational tax that people are charging now?
This, for communities that would like to shift away from the occupational tax burden, this is the only way to do so, is a constitutional amendment, because they need an alternative option.
How would a city,
But-
how would a city or county make that money up, you think, in a new form of taxation? What would we be taxing differently, you think?
We have the math and the data to show that sales tax would be possible to make up for that in some communities, but the point is that that should be a local decision. That should not be mandated from anybody. And so if that is an option, it should be an option for the local communities to decide to use.
It's a great way to get elected as a state representative, but a real great way to get a local elected official put out of office.
And I know that happens a lot when local officials are forced to raise their occupational taxes over and over, because it's the only option they have. You know,
Well,
So-
if the state would manage their budget and not put their retirement on our backs because they didn't do their job, we wouldn't have that problem.
Preaching to the choir.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Muldoon?
So you're looking, one thing you're looking for cities and counties to be able to do is charge their own local tax on goods or something?
And when we talk about tax diversification, the number one go-to that people talk about is sales tax, because it generates the most revenue, it's the most reliable, but the door is the possibilities we cannot really begin to discuss or create, because this constitutional barrier is so significant. So upon a ratification and the amendment being approved by voters, we all need to be at that table of policy formation. So that's part of why we are building this coalition now, before it's even placed on the ballot.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I don't mean to
You
be
got,
vague.
hey, you got a tough job.
Yes, I was saying to someone earlier today, I don't mean to editorialize too much, but talking about how I'm just a single issue lobbyist, but it's the hardest issue ever, so. But I love it. I wouldn't rather do anything else. So,
Any other questions? Okay, if none, thank you, Ms. Muldoon, for
Thank
the
you all.
information. We appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
thank you.
Okay. Next up on our agenda is we have a report from the Transportation Policy Committee, Mr. Andy Rush.
Yes, sir. TPC met in this room at 12:30 earlier this afternoon. We had great attendance, just like it's good to see everybody here in the boardroom today, in the board meeting. Couple of items of note, we had Megan Tobin. Megan is with the Louisville Regional Airport Authority. I thought she did a great job presenting a fantastic presentation about what's going on over at the airport, the economic engine that is. I think one of the main takeaways, I didn't realize is that their data shows that between fiscal 22 and 23, they're the fastest growing airport in the country. That's fantastic. It's fantastic. So I think that's on the passenger side, not the freight side. Freight side, they're top 5 in the world, and they're going steady. So it's fantastic to hear about that from the airport authority. Hope you all enjoyed that, for those that are in the room. We elected new 2024 TPC officers. More on that on the next agenda item. We ratified our TTCC officers, our Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee officers for 2024. It's the status quo. Mr. Matt Meunier from Jeffersontown and Ms. Aida Kopik from TARP. They're going to remain our TTCC chair and vice chair for one more year. We had a conversation, Kyle Thorne presented on the, well, it's been a while since we've talked about this in this room. The FRA grant, the FRA Corridor Identification Grant, KIPDA in, partnership with Louisville Metro. Probably last February or March, put in for that grant, and we were awarded that grant in December, early December. We got to, that was the announcement, so we're happy to announce that. A little bit more on that later in this agenda, or later on this agenda. But that's well underway. We've been meeting with the Federal Railroad Administration over the last few weeks. And again, for those that don't remember, that's to study the viability of passenger rail service, reinstituting passenger rail service between Louisville and Chicago. Our grant is focused on the Louisville to Indianapolis portion of it, while INDOT, Indiana Department of Transportation, is taking the Indianapolis to Chicago portion. So we're real excited about that. Hope you are as well. Another grant, Transportation World, is the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. That's one that virtually everybody in the room is a part of. We issued the notice to proceed to our consultants, HDR Engineering, just within the past few weeks. So we're real excited to get that underway. So more on that, more on that real soon too. We had a couple other agenda items. Amendment 5, for those of you that are in the MPO world, that will be processed next month. So that concludes my TPC report.
Okay. All right, that was item number 8 on our thing, so that is an action request, so we need a motion to accept the TPC's report.
Motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any other questions or discussion for Mr. Rush? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign, motion carried.
Okay.
You're gonna transition right on into item number 9.
Yes.
Okay, and it's the approval of the 2024 TPC officers.
So our, with board chairman Bowling, he has the opportunity to be, as the chairman of the KIPDA Board of Directors of 2024, he has the opportunity to be, for the TPC bylaws, to be the TPC chairman as well. He's opting to be your board chairman as part of this body. And so we had to establish a nominating committee for our new officers for TPC in the new year. And so that nominating committee met first of last week, and they nominated Mayor Byron Chapman of Middletown, representing Jefferson County League of Cities, and Keith Griffey, representing Bullitt County, to be our TPC 2024 TPC chairman and 2024 TPC vice chairman, respectively. And so the request for action here is to ratify those selections by this body.
Okay, so we have before us then item number 9 is the approval and ratification of those that are appointed to the TPC officers. Need a motion to ratify? We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Motion carried. Next up, then, is the procurement process for the FRA grant.
Yes, sir. I mentioned just a moment ago that a couple of things. One, we've got the procurement well underway, and we've got our consultant under contract and notice proceeding that safety grant for that railroad grant that I mentioned. I'm coming to you all today seeking permission for KIPDA staff to go ahead and pursue a procurement process through the RFP process. We want to get that underway probably hopefully before the next time we see each other next month. So that program is moving rapidly through what they call the FRA prescriptive process, step 1. This is for step 1 of that process. So it's seeking this body's approval of going out to an RFP process.
Okay, we need a motion in to seek the RFP process.
Yes,
So
okay.
item number 10 then is we need a motion then to go ahead for the Director of Transportation to seek out an RFP process for the procurement of the FRA grant.
Okay.
So, second.
Second? Did you get that? Okay. Any other questions or discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed,
Aye.
like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Next up is the Regional Transportation Council, Mr. Mike Walden.
Thank you. The KIPDA Regional Transportation Council meeting was held at 1 p.m. today in the KIPDA conference room. First agenda item was the November 14 Regional Transportation Council meeting minutes. The next was a public comment period. There were no public comments. Next, we heard from a guest speaker, Garrett Morris of the KYTC Office of Transportation Delivery. He spoke about section 5310 and 5311 funding opportunities. The following agenda item was the county transportation updates for the region. The consensus was that KYTC did an excellent job with the recent snow removal. And other business, KIPDA staff gave updates on the recent Federal Railroad Administration grant, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, and a $1.2 million wildlife crossing grant to study I-64 and US 60 between Louisville and Frankfurt. And the next KIPDA Regional Transportation Council meeting will be held on April 25th. That concludes my report.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? If no, I need a motion then to accept the Regional Transportation Council's report.
Motion.
Have a motion and a second?
Second.
Second. Any other questions or discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like? Motion carried. Next up is item number 12, the CE division contracts. Alicia Harper, you have that information for us?
Sure do. This is on page 54 in your agenda. So I'm asking for approval for 2 contracts for KIPDA staff to administer some federal grants. The first one is a CDBG for a recovery housing program. It was awarded to the Haven Ministries, the amount of $365,820. And this is to construct a 5-bedroom, 2-bath housing unit named New Dawn Housing located in Portland. And this is going to serve 9 women who are in recovery from substance use disorder and attain stable housing. So we're going to administer this project in the amount of $18,291. And the second one is the Cleaner Water Grant. This is for the Louisville Water Company. They received $500,000 for the Huckleberry Lane Oakway Main Extension, and KIPDA will administer this project for $12,500. So action is requested to approve these 2 contracts with the Haven Ministries and the Louisville Water Company.
Okay. So we have a motion to accept these 2 contracts?
Second.
Second? Okay. Any other questions or discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like? Motion carried. Thank you, Alicia. You're up next.
All right, this is agenda item 13, on page 55, and it's regarding the area development fund. So if you all remember last year, KIPDA, the SEDS division had a surplus in the JFA funding in the amount of $55,103.23. So the board approved a transfer of that JFA to our ADF fund. We did get approval from the Department of Local Government for that transfer. So I'm asking you all to actually transfer the amount of $55,103.23 from JFA to our ADF fund. And the new judges, the area development fund was kind of, I guess, done away with in 2018, but up until then, we had an area development fund, and it was for capital projects that would contribute to community and industrial development. These funds were actually from the state given to our area development districts, and then you all submitted applications for any of these capital projects. We look at the application, the board approves those applications, and it gets sent out up to DLG for approval. Those eligible projects for the ADF are anything construction, reconstruction of other improvements to real estate, acquisition of property, major equipment purchases, installation of public facilities, solid waste management, architectural, engineering, legal fees in conjunction with capital projects. A lot of the projects in the past were equipment for your fire department or for your sheriff's office, tornado sirens. I know Spencer County used some of this funding for their Rachel lighting project in their park. So it's a little bit open to whatever the need is in your all's community. And the way the ADF is broken down, in the past, we've always done Jefferson County received 50% of that funding, and each of the KIPDA Kentucky counties received the remaining 50% broken evenly through that. So this year we'll have Jefferson County at $27,708.58. And each county will receive $4,629.77. So more details will be sent out from me, along with an application that will need to be filled out. But I'm actually asking for action to actually transfer those funds from ADF or from JFA to ADF. That makes sense?
Okay, wait, entertain a motion then to transfer the funds from JVA to the ADF fund.
JFA to ADF.
What action?
I don't know. We have a motion, we have a second. Is that okay? Any other questions or? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
And don't be scared when she says application. It's probably the easiest application you'll ever fill out. It's just one page, detailing what the project is, a couple sentence narrative. So it's a very simple
It's
application.
very simple. So if you all have ideas in mind, I can fill it out for you and just let me know.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you, Ms.
all.
Harper. Next item on our agenda is item number 14, local dues discussion. Mr. Haley, you have that for us?
I'm gonna do this, with Andy. If Andy could come up here, and you want to sit over here with me, and we can just kind of go through the presentation. Paul, am I running this from here, or you all? Yeah, that might be easier with some of the slides. Got it. Yeah, the dues discussions, it's been a long time coming. This is the first time the board has heard a presentation about the dues in over 30 years. We began working on this over the summer. We presented to the KIPDA Executive Committee in September, and we took their feedback and have gone out to try to meet individually with those that do pay dues to answer any questions and kind of go through the needs. So I apologize if there's any duplication with this presentation, but I did think it was important, since this is such an important matter, to kind of highlight the need. So again, to the point, it's been over 30 years since KIPDA last reviewed its due structure. The formula for KIPDA dues is not currently included in our charter. I would like for that to get codified moving forward, but at this time, the only language in our charter that kind of expresses how dues are collected states the agency, by action of the agency policy body, so this board may establish an operating budget to meet expenses of approved programs. All such expenditures, if any, shall be authorized by each member government unit and shall be borne by member units in proportionate shares as determined by the agency. So that historically has been a population. So to determine how dues were collected, we had to start going back, because again, it's not in our charter. So we went back looking through the board minutes, and we found in April of 1993, the KIPDA board approved a formula consisting of two components. The first is 10 cents per capita based on the 1990 census. So that was to go to our general dues. The second component is proportionate by capita to make the transportation match. So again, 10 cents per capita based on population, and then the transportation match, which is done by proportionate shares, also by population. Moving slow today. The funding that KIPDA receives to conduct the activities from our transportation division requires local match. KIPDA operates almost entirely with restricted funds, so the only opportunity to provide match is through our local dues. Our MPO activities in Bullitt, Jefferson, Oldham, Clark, and Floyd counties require a 20% local match, with the exception of the Federal Highways Planning Program, where Kentucky provides 5% of the match. The regional transportation programs, that's Henry, Shelby, Spencer, and Trimble, requires a 10% match. And I'll turn it over to Andy to go into more detail on the transportation match.
Okay, so on the screen right there is Kentucky only, and Indiana will come up in the next slide. So these are the federal transportation funds that by formula come into KIPDA, the KIPDA MPO. Okay, on the left side, you'll see, you hear me talking when I get up at the podium every now and then about PL dollars, Metropolitan Planning dollars. Let's call those the FHWA, or the Federal Highway Administration dollars. That's a big number there, $1.3 million in Kentucky. That middle column is, you might hear me from time to time talk about, FTA Section 5303, FTA, Federal Transit Administration. So we've got the highway dollars, the transit dollars, similar formulas that are paid to urbanized area by formula. You can see the federal amounts at the top. You can see the required KIPDA match. And most importantly on this slide is that kind of that bottom left. You see, as Jared mentioned, KYTC on the federal highways dollars, they provide 5 of the 20% match, or 25% of the match, if you will. And so that's big for us and for the MPOs across the state. They don't provide that match on the transit dollars, by the way. So these are not capital dollars. That's important to note. These are the planning dollars. Okay, these go for MPO operations. Those are the dollars that we sometimes farm out to communities to do planning efforts. So here's the Indiana component. Similar story here. You'll notice on that bottom line state match, there's 0 state match. So that actually does increase the burden on our Indiana communities, unfortunately, because NDOT does not match. Also important to note on the Indiana side, we'll have a slide later. Indiana is more generous. Their formula, when they distribute money to MPOs across Indiana, they are significantly more generous, if you will, with the distribution of those funds than is Kentucky. So it's a bit of a double whammy in that regard. NDOT shares more money, but doesn't match it, therefore increasing the need for the match. Does that make sense? Kentucky shares a little bit less per capita, matches a good chunk of it, decreasing the need for the match. And this is for our RTC, our regional planning partners, the Henry, Trimble, Spencer, and Shelby. KIPDA, just like every other ad across Kentucky, operates the Regional Rural Transportation Planning Program. That's not a federal match that's required, but rather a state match. The state requires each ad to match it at a 10% amount. And so if we put all of those together, we've got what we need as a match, what we quote unquote need as a match is 300 and some odd thousand, 315,000 and change on the Kentucky side, 114,000 and change on the Indiana side, and then 9,200 from the rural side. That's a sum total of $439,000. That's a substantial amount of money. But what we've learned over the last several years, and more on that in a minute, is through the various highway bills, there's more money into the system. We call it inflation, call it the new highway bill, call it what have you. There's a significant amount of money in need of match over the last decade or so. Our current dues, the dues we've received for the last 30 years, more than 30 years, is in the neighborhood of that 244,000. That leaves us with a shortfall of 194,000. And I want to be clear about this. That's a shortfall that, this is just what transportation needs, the 439,000. This is not KIPDA as an entire agency. This is the transportation side. Yes, transportation is a bit of a hog of the match, but we almost have to be. The MPO function requires such a match. And I think I'll turn it back over to Jared this time.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, the next few slides present the dues per capita based on the 2020 population. The due payments, again, were based off the 1990 census and have not been updated to reflect the increase in population over the last 3 decennial census. Differences in the per capita dues are related to 2 factors, the MPO versus non-MPO jurisdictions, and then obviously the population growth over the last 40 years at this point. So what you see are the dues collection are all over the board right now with the per capita. In Kentucky, Louisville Metro currently pays the highest dues per capita at 22 cents, while Spencer County pays the least at 5.5 cents. KIPDA is collecting 18.6 cents per capita, or $190,992 from our Kentucky members. On the Indiana side, Indiana and New Albany pays the highest dues per capita at 46.4 cents, while Floyd County is currently paying the least at 10.8 cents. As in Kentucky, the dues are all over the board, but the disparity is even greater. In total, KIPDA collects $53,576 from our Indiana members at a dues per capita of 26.6 cents. And then Andy, I'll turn it back over to Andy to speak on how that's kept up with the required transportation match.
Okay, so remember I mentioned a minute ago how the federal dollars have been on the increase. And so on this graph on the bottom left of the screen there, the straight line, the bottom line there, that's just under 200,000. That's our dues that we've collected. It's been steady for decades at this point. That jagged line is the amount that we would need to match at that 20% basis, that 20% of those federal dollars.